Summon the Gods by Melinda Kucsera, Book 2 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy.
Part 13, the last part. Chapter 51, Stairway to Darkness. I thought we were releasing the others. Garen waved to the stairs behind them as he followed Uriah down. The former god of the underworld didn't stop or turn around.
We will, but I need to check something first. It might tell us how much time we've got to stop her.
That didn't sound good, but time was running out, so checking how long they had to stop it was a wise decision. Garen couldn't really argue with it. I hope we have tons of time because we still don't have a solution. And that was a problem, because he wasn't ready to shuffle off his immortal coil. The staircase plunged deep underground, and the masochist who created it carved it in a steep, narrow, straight line with open risers, so if one tripped over the uneven steps, one could tumble all the way to the bottom. Where are we going? Garen put all thoughts of falling to his doom out of his mind, and fixed his gaze on the steps in front of him.
Down to the abyss, hurry!
Uriah hustled, taking the steps two at a time like a maniac. Nor did his answer make any sense. Garen kept one hand on the wall as he descended, since there wasn't a handrail on this devil-made staircase. How can the abyss tell us how much time is left? Garen cursed when the fireball went out, leaving just smoke curling up from his fingers. Damn it! He concentrated on igniting another one. His brief visit to the mortal world returned a trickle of his old power, and he channeled it into a fireball to light his way. This used to be so easy before I fell.
If the power to break time exists, then that's where it is. Anyone who claims to have power could only get it from the abyss, so we should see some indication of its use.
Uriah said over his shoulder without pausing. Garen couldn't see what Uriah used for light, if he used anything at all. The ex-god of the underworld pounded down those stairs like they did something to offend him, leaving Garen far behind until flames sparked from his fingers. Thank God that worked. An orange glow illuminated the steps again, and he stomped down them too. Where the hell is the bottom of this damned staircase? When Garen finally reached the bottom, he stood on a rocky island surrounded by a black goo that washed ashore as waves disturbed its surface. The goo didn't shine or reflect light or give off any. It was a matte, black substance that seemed to drink in the light from the flames bobbing on his fist, and Garen held that fire close to his chest to protect it from the goo. Oh great, now this stuff is putting weird ideas in my head. If the fire goes out because of the goo, I'll just summon another one. Even as he thought that, the fear of the fire going out and never rekindling nibbled at the back of his mind. Garen tried again to banish it, but he couldn't, not while staring at that black substance. It couldn't snuff out all fires everywhere. Logically, he knew that, but the thought that it might just do that if it ever got out of this place kept grabbing hold of his imagination and populating it with visions of eternal darkness. Hurry up, and do whatever you need to do to find out how much time we have left. This place is unnerving. Garen backed away from the goo.
You don't have to stay down here.
Uriah crouched at the edge of the rocky island and extended his hand. I still don't understand how the adversary and his flunky, Pristina, the ex-goddess of the present, intend to break time. They didn't create it, so how can they break something they didn't create? Garen sat on the third step from the bottom and ran his other hand over the flame, floating above his fist.
You can still break a vase even if you didn't create it, so why would time be any different?
Uriah lowered his hand until it hovered over the black goo. That's true, but wouldn't the creator make time harder to break than a vase? Why am I debating the nature of time with him? Garen shifted his weight on the step. What's your plan? Please tell me you have one, because I'm fresh out of plans right now that don't involve commandeering the nearest army. But I don't think that would help right now.
But the abyss gives away it can take back.
Uriah shrugged, but he didn't touch the goo, and the goo didn't rise and pull him in either, although images of that happening kept flitting through Gern's mind. You think it will? Because that just sounded like crazy talk to Gern. The abyss wasn't sentient, and it would have to be for it to take back what it gave.
Yes, the same force that created everything also created the abyss, and the same entity created both. Do you honestly think that entity would create it and give it the power to destroy its own creation?
Uriah glanced at him over his shoulder, and his eyes were dark ovals with no whites at all, just the same matte black darkness as the goo. Garen shuddered at the sight. His magic was fire-based, and like all the elemental magics, light-based. But the abyss was the opposite of both, and utterly alien and incomprehensible to him. Is the abyss the opposite of everything? It certainly looks like it.
No, it's the unformed and unused parts of the original creation from which we and all we interact with sprang from. It's a place of pure imagination where all ideas are born. From here, all our hopes and dreams take shape and come to us, for nothing is created nor destroyed. Everything has to go somewhere, and all the things that have no other place go to the abyss. That is their place. And sometimes we pluck out those hopes, dreams, and wishes and make them come true.
Uriah reached into the roiling surface of the abyss and plucked out a glowing white rock. What's that? Garen shot to his feet, and only sheer force of will kept him from bolting up the stairs. I need to see this through because I need time to find an army to lead, and they'll need training. That will take time, too. He clenched his other fist and tensed so he was ready to run up those stairs and get the hell out of here the instant Uriah found what he needed.
The wish someone made, but his wish was so powerful it attracted all the wishes of all the people who want similar things. The abyss wants to manifest that collective wish, but it needs help.
Uriah bounced a white rock on his palm and it glowed brighter as the ex-god of the underworld headed for the stairs. How will that help things? That rock is here, but the adversary is on the moon and Pristina's on Earth, and we can't go to either place because we're subject to the ban of heaven. Did Uriah forget about that? Garen ran up the steps behind him, and despite being in hell, his breath sawed in and out of him. I need to get back into training before I claim an army, or I'll embarrass myself. Years of running and hiding from the fallen and surviving on scraps after he escaped the spire the first time eroded his fitness level until he was little better than a mortal, and he must rectify that immediately after he stopped time from ending.
You're banned, but I'm not.
Uriah took the stairs at a dead run, leaving Garen behind. What are you saying? How could the ban not apply to you? You're from the same pantheon as me. Garen pushed himself to take the stairs 2 at a time, even though his thighs burned from the effort.
You were sent to hell for punishment, so you're subject to the ban, but I'm a god of the underworld.
Uriah stopped midway and spread his arms to encompass his fallen kingdom as he pontificated.
This was my kingdom before the adversary took it over and turned it into his private hell. So I wasn't sent here, I came here, and I can leave it whenever I want.
So that's why the adversary imprisoned you. He couldn't let you leave and tell anyone his plans. Garen slowed to catch his breath since Uriah stood on the stairs. His head tilted as he considered something. Hopefully, there was a plan rolling around inside his head.
Yes, but I think it's time that we did exactly that.
Uriah held the glowing white rock up. Take me with you. Garen gasped for breath as he stopped on the step below Uriah, and his heart pounded away in his chest. Sweat poured down his back, under his arms, down his chest, confirming he just got a good workout in. What about the ban? Although it didn't stop Pristina and her sycophants from summoning him, so maybe the ban wasn't as powerful as Garen had assumed.
To hell with the ban. I think even the creator would understand that I'm breaking it for the greater good. After all, the afterlife isn't so fun without the friends you've made along the way.
Uriah extended his other hand. Gwen clasped it. All right, I suppose we can't throw things any more off balance than they already are.
No, but we might just throw it back into alignment again if we're lucky.
Uriah said as white light blotted out everything.
Chapter 52. Wishing for a plan. The fog shredded as the adversary charged toward him. His training probably should have kicked in because he was trained to fight and react to a myriad of situations, including this one. But those lessons happened a long time ago, and he wasn't that angel anymore. Besides, Arginil couldn't remember a single counter move, so he stood there and stared as the last words of his hasty prayer repeated in his head. A bright beam slammed into the ground a few feet away and kicked up dust. What caused the light beam? Not the gateways collapsing quietly behind him as their magical fields failed. The beam came from somewhere outside the gray between.
Why are you just standing there?
Natali shoved him aside and he staggered, but that knocked him out of his stupor. Arginil stumbled a few steps more before he regained his balance and spun. The adversary crashed into a taller, broader, and more muscular Natali. Their gray robes strained to cover their body as Natali planted their larger feet in the gray dust and the mist swirling around them. The adversary slammed into their chest and bounced off the Versati. The Prince of Darkness actually stumbled until he caught his balance.
You can't beat me. You're just a useless cur with one trick. Well, I've got tricks too.
The adversary extended his hand. Natali shrank and became leaner as they doubled over, both hands pressed to their chest to keep the time crystal inside them. No! Arginil ran toward his friend as another bright light blinded him. He dodged just in time, and the beam struck the ground where he stood a moment before and exploded his footprints in the dust. Where the hell were these beams coming from? This one was even wider than the last one. Pain hammered on his chest as the time crystal banged against his ribs, but Arginil put one foot in front of the other because his friend needed him.
No.
The adversary cried out as a light beam struck his back and lit him up. As that jerk staggered, the time crystal settled back into its accustomed place. Arginil crashed into the adversary before the king of the fallen angels recovered and knocked him down into the fog. The gray dust covering the ground pelted him as he landed on the author of all his misery. But that was where his plan fell apart, because his hands banged into the gold collar around the adversary's throat as that jerk laughed at him. He still wore his crown, too. It must be welded to his head to have stayed on during the fall. Damn it, I can't choke him. Arginil scratched at the gold collar, but it covered the adversary's neck from his chin to his shoulders. But that jerk could choke him, and his hands closed around his unprotected throat and squeezed before Arginil could throw himself to the side. Arginil grabbed his wrists and tried to pry the adversary's hands off him, but that laughing jerk had a grip like an iron vice. The edges of his vision darkened as Natalie appeared in his peripheral vision and kicked the adversary, but that devil just kept laughing like he felt no pain at all from that blow.
You can't beat me. I'm older and more powerful than you both combined, and I'm winning.
Indeed he was. The light beams stabbed the ground around them, and they struck more often with shorter delays between them. Giant gray ribbons twisted in the cloudy sky, and images flickered along every surface. Arginil glanced away before they could mesmerize him.
What are those?
Someone asked. Maybe she was a demon who followed the adversary here, or maybe she was a fallen angel. It didn't matter because other voices echoed her question.
Take a good look. This is how time ends.
The adversary smiled as he faded into a dark mist, leaving Arginil kneeling on the ground. The jerk reformed in the center of his army. His crown was tilted at a rakish angle, but his smile was radiant as Arginil doubled over from the pain slamming into his chest. I won't let him win. Arginil pushed himself up and rose unsteadily to his feet. Thousands of time crystals bumped each other as they flew toward the Prince of Lies and crashed together in a deafening din that sent shockwaves through the ground. Gray dust pelted Arginil, forcing him to squint as he staggered forward, holding his chest. I must stop him, but he must also keep his time crystal inside him to have any hope of defeating the biggest devil of them all. A light beam hit the ground in front of him, and Arginil veered to miss it and bumped into Natalie.
I could try draining him if I can get close enough to touch him, but I'm not sure I can gain enough mass to become that dense again. I'm running low on energy.
The Versati shielded their eyes with their gloved hands as they stumbled onward beside him like a true friend. They really were in it to the bitter end, and that made Arginil feel strangely warm inside despite the pain. We could try that. If nothing else, it'll fix your low energy problem.
That's true.
Natalie studied their situation as they advanced. But Arginil couldn't think of a way to get close enough to the adversary to try that as 3 demons stepped in front of him. They were still woozy from the violent ejection of their time crystals, but more demons and even some fallen moved to intercept them.
We can't fight them all.
Natalie reminded him when he walked into the first row of demons, but they didn't part or get out of his way. Damn. They shoved him back, but he couldn't stop pressing on his chest to push them out of the way. Their true names hovered on the tip of his tongue. Why not use his gift to immobilize them? That will exhaust me. But does that really matter now? I don't think I'm leaving this place in any state to continue existing. Arginil said their true names and ordered them to freeze, and then did the same to the demons behind them. He shouldered past them and did the same for the 2 fallen angels behind them. It might not have worked if they weren't still recuperating from the shock of losing their time crystals and becoming mortal. None of the fallen were in any state to fight, but neither was he right now while he was fighting to keep his immortality intact, and one less time crystal from joining the thousands the adversaries slammed together. In his peripheral vision, the 2 gateways shook as sections darkened and split apart, releasing the magical energy that created them in brilliant fountains of glowing particles. And that question rattled around inside his head again. What would happen to someone in the gateway when it collapsed? Perhaps the adversary should find out.
What's the plan?
Natalie asked as they staggered along beside him with one hand pushing pushing against their time crystal and one hand raised to fend off the demons and fallen angels that converged on them. We send him back to hell somehow. Arginil glanced meaningfully at the collapsing gateway as he spoke the names of the next group of demons and fallen angels in their way.
That's a good plan, but we need a distraction or we'll never catch him off guard. Can you use your gift on them?
Natalie pointed at the giant cluster of time crystals floating in front of the adversary. An invisible force crushed them together, and the grinding sound of crystals on crystals grated on his nerves. Was the jerk trying to compact them into one massive crystal? That's what it looked like. How do I stop that? There were still too many bodies in the way. Arginil shook his head. I can't see anything more than you do when you look at them.
Can you freeze him? Because he's the one we need to stop.
Natalie pointed at the adversary's crown of winking red gems, since that was all they could see of him over the demons and fallen angels standing between them and him. That was a great question, could I? A name hovered on the tip of his tongue, and he had nothing to lose, so he shouted it. Samuel, stop! Release those crystals! A light beam shot past them and struck the crystals, but it didn't break the invisible net around them. They slammed into each other in a deafening clap that shook the ground and nearly knocked them over. In the silence that followed, his eyes were still too dazzled to see anything other than afterimages bouncing around from that damned light beam. It was twice as wide as the last three that landed. The adversary laughed again, and his mocking laugh cut through the quiet. Samuel, stop! Arginil shouted again, and this time he threw the full force of his gift behind those two words. His head throbbed and his violet eyes blazed, but not as bright as those damned light beams, slicing through the clouds and the giant gray ribbons of images above.
Never. You think you can control me? I'll destroy you, and then I'll finish building a new world in peace.
The adversary charged again, knocking his people aside with his dark aura as it expanded. Arginil motioned for Natalie to stay back. Maybe they could get close enough to siphon some of the adversary's aura. If not, then he'd just have to hope he could get the right angle to throw the adversary into the gateway. But first, he needed to get the jerk close to the gateway. This time, he didn't stand his ground since the gateways were some distance behind him. Instead, Arginil turned and ran toward the mouth of the gateway that brought him here, and the devil gave chase, just as he hoped. One of his lieutenants followed the blonde demon with the lion's armor. Natalie also followed, but the Versati disappeared behind the adversary's dark aura.
Lynistra?
Said his gift, but he didn't say her name because he was too busy trying to freeze the adversary. Morningstar stopped. Arginil veered around a white glow that sprang in front of him. He must reach the gateway, but the glow expanded until it blocked his path again. What the hell was happening? The light faded, leaving two men standing there looking a bit shaken. One had weird, inverted eyes that were all black and swirly, and he held a glowing white crystal in his hand. But he didn't have horns or a halo or a collar, so he wasn't a demon or a fallen angel, and that made him irrelevant right now. That was all Arginil noticed as he pushed past him. Garen grabbed his arm and tried to stop him.
What did I miss?
Where did you come from? Arginil put that question aside when the ex-god just grinned like he knew a secret. He could ask again later, if there was a later. You'll ruin everything if you don't let go of me. Arginil shook the ex-god of war off him and glanced behind him. The adversary pushed past the last line of demons. Good. He was still following. Was Natalie close enough to absorb some of his power? Arginil couldn't see the Versati, but he trusted them to do their part as soon as they could.
Would you excuse me? I see someone I need to punch in the face. We can catch up later.
Garen patted his arm. Before the ex-god of war could mess up his plans, Arginil grabbed his arm and towed the ex-god toward the gateways.
What are you doing?
Garen tried to break his grip, but he couldn't, so he stumbled after him. I have a plan, and you're interfering with it. Arginil hoped he said that low enough that only Garen heard. The ex-god nodded, so maybe he caught on.
Uriah, you know what to do.
Garen shouted to the guy with swirly black eyes. Who's Uriah? Arginil had to ask, in case that guy could help with his plan.
He's an ex-god of the underworld, and he's got something that might help.
But you're not sure. Arginil skidded to a stop as they reached the gateways.
Well, nothing's ever certain. Surely you knew that. But right now, even a slim chance is better than nothing, right?
Garen kicked the dust, sending it flying into the mouth of the gateway. I guess. Arginil spun to face the adversary, but that jerk stopped. Damn it, he wasn't close enough.
What are you doing here?
The adversary pointed a shaking finger at Uriah. Since the adversary faced away from him, Arginil waved for Uriah to come to them. The ex-god scowled, but he sauntered toward the adversary as requested, still holding that glowing rock out like it might explode if he got too near it. That ex-god made the perfect distraction. Could he just throw it at the adversary and poof, problem solved? Probably not, since nothing was ever that easy. But Arginil wished just once that it was that easy, as Natalie appeared and crept quietly toward the adversary from behind, with their ungloved hands extended. The Versatic glared at Arginil until he nodded. He was as ready as he'd ever be. He still wasn't sure he was strong enough to throw the adversary into the gateway, but he would damn well try. Natalie stopped at the edge of the adversary's shadowy aura. It extended about 6 feet out from his body until the Versace rested her hands on it. His aura shrank inward, and Natalie advanced until their hands landed on the adversary's back. He swung around and shoved the Versace hard enough to send them sprawling in the dust. Arginil rushed forward, but an armored demon plowed into the adversary's side, knocking him off balance. Garen darted past and punched the adversary in the face, staggering him further. Arginil grabbed his arm and flung him toward the disappearing mouth of the gateway, but the jerk skidded to a stop somehow and teetered on the edge until Natalie slammed into him. No! Arginil grabbed their ankle and yanked the Versace out of the gateway.
I think we'd better run away now.
Geraint grabbed his arm and hauled him and Natalie away from the gateway as a transparent shadow replaced its once luminous glow.
You can't escape me.
The adversary glared at them, and his violet eyes darkened until they were black pits, and that darkness leaped out of him and slammed into them.
Chapter 53, Time to Fall. Rosalie gauged the distance. She stood by the ex-gods just outside the ring of symbols drawn on the earth to create the summoning spell. Mom stood at the edge of the clearing near the trees growing under the haven's glowing dome. Could I reach Mom in time if Priscina releases the magic bolt charging between her hands? I have to try. If she didn't, then she might cease to exist. Life was complicated lately, but she still hoped to survive long enough for things to go back to being boring again.
You're leaving now?
Robin stared at Sorn and the hand he extended to her. Come on, Mom. Take his hand and take my baby self out of here. Rosalie hoped her mother would go as an angel appeared behind her mom. He rested a hand on her arm and pulled her away. Would he protect her from Pristina? I can't take that chance. Rosalie darted across the grassy clearing through a gap between 2 trees. If I circle around, I can come at Pristina from behind. Rosalie ran as fast as she could dodge bushes and other trees toward where Pristina stood a moment ago. Hopefully, she didn't move.
You must leave now. You broke the cardinal rule, and I can't allow you to stay here any longer,
said the angel of the haven as he hopefully dragged Mom away.
What about her? She flung lightning bolts at her.
Robin shouted, and she was right.
Yes, she did, but she missed. You didn't. And the rules are clear on this. There's no fighting allowed, and no harm can befall any guest while they are inside the haven.
Let her stay. It's all ending anyway. Let her watch the end of everything,
Pristina said as Rosalie spotted the back of her red dress through the leaves. Gotcha, you won't bother my mom ever again. Rosalie crept as quietly as she could and pushed the branches out of her way. Pristina raised her glowing hands and a lightning bolt formed between them. But a glowing green dome dropped over Mom and the angel, pulling her toward the edge of the haven, forcing them to stop. Could Sarn's shield stand against one of Pristina's lightning bolts? I can't risk it, not while he's holding the best friend I've ever had. Ran would never forgive me if I didn't save him. Rosalie rose from her crouch and charged. I've had enough of you. Rosalie slammed into Pristina's back and knocked the ex-goddess down.
You think you can beat me, mortal? Well, think again.
Pristina seized her ankle, twisted, and pulled Rosalie down too. She landed in a heap next to the angry ex-goddess, and Pristina grabbed for her throat. Rosalie threw an arm up in time to block her, then rolled aside to put space between them. Pristina sat up straight and thrust her chest out again.
It's happening. The end is coming. Not even you can stop it now.
She meant the time time crystal, of course. Rosalie scrambled to her side and then put both her hands against the ex-goddess's chest and pushed on the crystal. How do I keep that damned thing inside her? Because it was pushing back as hard as she pushed on it. I might not like her, but she's still the ex-goddess of the present, and we need a present or there's no past or future. Rosalie had nothing to restrain her. I don't have that kind of magic. And Sarn already shielded Mom. She could ask him to use his magic to restrain Pristina, but would he do it? Sarn strode away like he just wanted to get the hell out of there, and Rosalie didn't blame him. She wanted nothing more than to return to the library under Mount Eredrin and talk this all over with Ran, and Marin, and Ivarian too, if that's where he went when he vanished earlier.
You can't stop me, but I can stop you.
Pristina wrapped both hands around her throat and choked Rosalie. So this is the thanks I get for trying to save your life? Rosalie struggled to stay conscious as she spent her remaining breath on that snarky comment. She must stop that crystal from shooting out of Pristina's chest, even if she died in the process. As the edges of her vision darkened, one of that damned crystal's vertices pierced the ex-time goddess's skin and cut into her palm. Blood welled from the cut and the expanding hole in the ex-goddess's chest as the crystal tried to force its way between Pristina's ribs. The ground shook, and from somewhere behind them, Gunnar shouted,
"Stop! Don't kill her!"
"I'm trying to save her, you fool!" Rosalie couldn't look for him because the crystal exploded out of Pristina. It bored through her hands, still pressed against the ex-goddess's chest. Blood flowed freely from the fist-sized hole, and there was a ton of power in that blood. I could use it. I could save us all with it, if she just reached for it. Rosalie commanded that blood to form a shield between her hands and the time crystal. Layer by layer, she built that bloody shield until it was a wedge, shoving that goddamned crystal back into the bitch ex-goddess's shuddering body. "Sorry, Mom, but I choose blood magic. You can have all the magical strings. You don't get to die today." Rosalie forced the edges of the wound to knit back together and then hardened the scar over it so the crystal couldn't escape again. "Because I'm not doing this all over again. This is a one-time deal." But Pristina collapsed on the ground and lay as still as a corpse. No breath made her chest rise. Her eyes were glazed and fixed in death. "No, I saved her." Rosalie dropped to her knees and poked the ex-goddess, but she didn't lash out or complain. "What do I do now? I must save her. You don't get to die today. Do you hear me, Pristina?" Rosalie called to the blood inside the ex-goddess and forced it to circulate as her own blood did and make the ex-goddess's heart beat. But she wasn't God. She was just a mortal woman who walked a dangerous path between two magics. She couldn't give life back to the lifeless. "No, you can't die." Rosalie pounded on the scar over the spot where the time crystal exited the ex-goddess.
"You killed her."
Dinar grabbed her upper arms and pulled her away from Pristina. "Now she killed herself. I tried to save her, even though she didn't want me to." Rosalie broke his grip and staggered away, her hands covered in the cooling blood of the former goddess. What would happen now? The present had no goddess, and the goddess of the past was dying. I must do something, but what can I do? The ground shook under her and split open, sending cracks running all over the place. Oh no! Did Mom and Sarn get out? Where's that angel? What made the light blinding her? She didn't pay attention when she worked her blood magic on Pristina, but now she couldn't ignore the strobing lights alternatingly blinding her. What is making all that light? Bright beams shot out of Pristina's body, and one slammed into Rosalie, throwing her against the shield over the haven. She slid down it and groaned as pain shot through her body. What have I done? I can't worry about that now. I must find Mom and Sarn and make sure they got out of the haven. Rosalie pushed through the gold shield as running footsteps sounded behind her. Since she didn't want to talk to anyone, she ran towards the green glow ahead of her. Thankfully, the snow reflected it, making Sarn easy to spot from a distance. Cold air buffeted her, and the ground shook as she ran, but Rosalie couldn't stop, not even to shiver from the wind cutting through her thin dress. She still wasn't dressed for this type of weather, but that wasn't important right now. Time was dead, and they'd all die if she couldn't figure out something to do. A person in gray robes stayed close to Sarn, and he carried Ran wrapped in his green cloak. It was weird seeing Sarn without a hood. Like his son, his hair was dark and slightly wavy, especially in the back. Sarn didn't turn or even check who followed them, but he probably knew already, since his magic kept track of everyone around him, so he didn't need to look. He could keep his glowing eyes fixed on the trees towering over the snowy clearing around the haven, and he headed for them like his life depended on it. Mom followed him, but she didn't have magical help, just two half-human wolf shifters running along at her side. But Mom still didn't run all that fast. She probably doesn't want to jostle me too much. That thought made Rosalie smile. Mom could be hard and unyielding yielding sometimes, but she loved just as fiercely as she fought. I need to remember that next time we butt heads over something. Mom, I screwed up! Rosalie dropped to her knees in the snow when she caught up to them finally. Pristina's blood covered her shaking hands, and probably some of her own blood did too. The cuts on her hands from the time Crystal healed since she stared at them.
What are you talking about?
Mom rested her hand on her dozing daughter's head. Her baby rested snugly in a fabric pouch with straps that held the baby close to her chest, and the red brigandine coat Mom wore all the time.
What did you do?
Mom scowled at her bloody hands. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to stop her. Now all of time is doomed. I destroyed what I came to save. A tear ran down Rosalie's cheek and landed in the snow as the Haven's glow intensified behind her. Mom backed away as someone called her name.
Robin?
Strella?
Mom, are you listening to me? Rosalie stood up with her bloody hands extended. She didn't know what she wanted from her mother. Maybe forgiveness because she tried her best to stop Pristina, but in the end, nothing she did was enough. Because I'm not an ex-god. I'm just a mortal woman, so I never really had a chance. And that was the hardest part to accept.
Yes, but you're not making sense. How could you destroy time? It's always existed. Only its creator could destroy it, and you aren't him.
Mom wrapped her arms around her napping baby as lights strobed on and off rapidly behind them. Was Mom right? What she said sounded far more logical than anything Rosalie heard in a month or more. What if Mom's right? Rosalie turned toward the Haven, and her mind whirled with questions. If you're right then, maybe I just dinted it a bit. Maybe the world won't end in the next hour. Rosalie ran back to the Haven as a beam shot out of the Haven's glowing dome into the sky, and the clouds swirled around it. Oh my god, maybe time was safe, but she wasn't. I'd better run faster. She pushed her tired body until she slammed face first into the shield and bounced off it. Rosalie landed on her back in the snow and stared dizzily at the gold shield in her way. Why won't you let me pass? I'm trying to save time, and I can't do that while the remaining time gods are inside the Haven. She sat up and rubbed her throbbing nose. Hopefully it wasn't broken. If it was, then she'd deal with it afterward. Rosalie crawled back to the shield and pounded on it. Let me in! I need to fix things, but I can't do that from out here.
I can't let you in because you broke the rules,
said the Haven's guardian angel, but he didn't sound at all apologetic. You must let me in. I must fix things. Rosalie knocked harder until her knuckles throbbed. Maybe one of the remaining time gods would hear her if she made a loud enough ruckus.
You aren't listening to me. I physically cannot let you in. The shield won't allow it, and I can't do anything about that. I didn't create the shield, and I don't maintain it. So I would like to help you, but I can't.
Now he did sound apologetic, but he didn't appear. The angel remained a disembodied voice. Then I'll have to find another way inside. Rosalie cursed as she shoved herself up. Sitting in the snow wouldn't get her anything except a wet dress, so she'd better search for a weak spot or some way to get Faye or Layla's attention. The shield shattered the moment she was vertical, and a wall of pure force slammed into Rosalie and knocked her down again. This time she landed face-birth in the snow, and she groaned as she pushed up to her hands and knees. Why is it so difficult to save the world? Slowly, she gained her feet, and every part of her throbbed, but she staggered toward the spot where the shield stood before it exploded, and then past it. This time, nothing barred her from entering the Haven.
I've got an idea.
Layla crouched by Pristina, shoved her arms under the dead ex-goddess, and picked her up.
Follow me.
Can't you just carry me? I'm feeling a bit beat up here, and the world was a bit wobbly. Rosalie grabbed a branch to steady her when she leaned too far to the right.
No, you can walk just fine. Come along, we don't have much time.
Layla didn't even glance behind her to make sure she followed. We don't have any time at all. Pristina saw to that. Since she had no choice and a lot of curiosity about just what Layla thought she could do, Rosalie staggered after her. Layla stopped by the remaining time gods. Hithaglir leaned against the massive altar rock, and what a surprise that was given his capricious nature. Rosalie expected him to bolt at any moment.
Hey, Faye, the present just needs an anchor point, right?
Layla laid the dead ex-goddess beside her two sisters.
What are you suggesting?
Faye crossed her arms over her chest. Hopefully she wasn't trying to stop her time crystal from exiting her body. Pristina's death should have ended that nonsense, unless she was working with someone. Oh god, what if she was working with someone? Now that Rosalie considered that, it made sense. Pristina must have worked with someone other than the Wild Hunt, who had all left the Haven for God knew where. And her 3 acolytes also fled the scene. Who did that leave? Who would a mad goddess team up with? Rosalie sank to the ground as a feeling of doom washed over her. How do I find out who Pristina teamed up with so I can stop them?
We give the present a new anchor. If I'm right, that should stop time from collapsing and buy us some breathing space
was to save your sister.
Layla punched through the hardened blood, sealing the wound in Pristina's chest, and ripped out the time crystal. Why did you do that? Rosalie snapped out of her funk as a cold dread wrapped icy arms around her and squeezed.
I'm giving the present a new anchor point, and you're it.
Layla turned and slammed the hand holding Pristina's time crystal into Rosalie. The world turned white, then black, as Rosalie slumped to the ground. Shouts followed her down into unconsciousness.
Chapter 54, Hanging by a Claw. Arginil staggered as pain tore through his chest muscles as a hand grasped the shadowy threshold of the gateway. Darkness edged his vision again as he, Gurin, and Nantali went down in a groaning pile as they tried to keep their time crystals from ripping out of them. A light beam struck the ground next to them as Lionestra staggered past them and slammed her plate metal boot down on the adversary's clawed hand. He roared, enraged by her flipping sides at the end.
I never did like your stupid crown.
Lionestra crouched and pried his hand off the edge and flung the adversary backward.
No, I will win in the end. It's inevitable,
he shouted as he tumbled into the dark void growing in the center of the gateway, disappearing from sight.
And good riddance.
Lionestra rose, and as she turned, the bulge in her breastplate shined as another light beam streaked past her. It looked like a time crystal made that dent when it tried to rip out of her chest and fly to the adversary, but the metal stopped it. That explained why she wasn't stumbling around. Do we thank her? Arginil wondered. The pain faded, and relief made him lightheaded as he struggled to push Guren off his chest. Without a word or a backward glance, Lionestra headed for the demons and fallen angels surrounding the captured time crystals. Perhaps silence was best in this scenario, since she was a demon after all, and she led an army to attack the library. The gateway winked out of existence a moment later, but the time crystals the adversary ripped out of his milling army remained in a tight cluster, and above, those gray ribbons of flickering images multiplied as they tore apart.
Did we win?
Natalie asked, as they rose and patted down their gray robes to remove the lighter gray dust from this place. I don't think so. Look there. Arginil pointed at the sky ribbons and the shattered pieces tumbling down like flickering snow.
Well, then it's a good thing I brought someone who can fix that.
Grin wrapped an arm around each of their shoulders and turned them to face Uriah. As if cued, that ex-god raised the glowing white rock above his head, and the air seemed to hum with barely restrained power.
Time is unraveling.
Can you fix it? He said you can, but he's made a lot of claims since I met him, and none were true.
Natalie folded their arms and glared at the ex-war god, but he either didn't hear her or he didn't care what she thought of him.
I can send the time crystals back to where they belong, so that way many immortals anchor the timeline again like the creator intended, and that should stabilize it. But he said something about a mad time goddess? This won't stop what she's doing, but it could buy someone time to stop her.
Uriah shrugged, though. Maybe he doubted Garen told him everything, too.
Do it, and if that doesn't stop her, then we take the fight to her. The adversary was kind enough to leave us an army.
Garen hummed a rousing tune that sounded suspiciously like a battle anthem, and he swayed to the music while still clinging to them.
I am doing it. This rock didn't come with instructions.
Uriah shook his head and held the rock higher over his head. The fog surged toward them, and it shimmered and warped as it flowed through the ranks of demons and fallen angels ringed around the floating pile of time crystals that towered over them. From the roiling mists emerged shadowy, spectral beings, caught between worlds. They faded in and out of existence as they darted about.
What are those things?
Igaran pointed at them as he squeezed their shoulders. They're probably ghosts, since this is the gray between and the place where the dead go. Arginil suppressed a shudder. This place was so creepy, but he couldn't leave it yet. Something was still undone. Maybe it was the mad goddess Uriah mentioned. Maybe it was the thousands of demons and fallen angels in a place where they didn't belong. But it was probably both.
Can you hurry up with those crystals? Time is literally tearing itself apart while we stand here gawking.
Natalie tried to pull away, but Garen pulled them back. Was he determined to meet his end with the three of them? Uriah nodded.
I know, but I'm making this up as I go along, so give me a little time to figure it out. The wish stone can't tell me what to do. It's just a rock with a lot of magic packed into it.
The wish stone pulsed with potential as Uriah stepped forward, holding the rock aloft, his face set with determination.
I wish everyone went to their proper places in time and space,
a man said, but not anyone Arginil recognized. This newcomer's voice was a resonant baritone, and Uriah repeated his wish.
I wish everyone everyone went to their proper places in time and space.
I wish everyone went to their proper places in time and space.
Natalie elbowed him in the side as they said it too. Garen caught on a moment later and shouted the same wish.
I wish everyone went to their proper places in time and space.
Archie Neal didn't understand why they all must say it, but he wouldn't be the reason this failed. I wish everyone went to their proper places in time and space, he said in unison with his friends and Uriah. On the third repetition, other voices joined in as the demons and fallen angels repeated it too. White light erupted from the wish stone, blinding Archie Neal, but he repeated that wish like his existence depended on it until the light faded, leaving Uriah swaying in the breeze as he held the crystal in his shaking hands. The invisible net snapped, freeing the time crystals, and they zoomed away from it and shot back into the chests of their former owners. Wounds closed as their owners staggered away, crying out in shock and pain. Soon they'd recover, and then what? Would they return to hell? How would they get there?
Our time crystals are restored. Our power is back.
A fallen angel shouted with delight. Leonestra jumped onto a demon's back and pointed toward a distant gleam between two shadowy hills on the horizon. That was where Thaniel went.
Heaven lies beyond that line of hills, and they won't expect us. Let's take it over.
A cheer went up as the demons and fallen angels rallied around her. She vaulted off the demon's back and led the charge. With renewed purpose, the demonic army surged forward, weapons raised like they weren't just lying gasping on the ground, like landed fish with holes in their chests. Archie Neal recalled how quickly he mended when Layla shoved that time crystal back into his chest. But he still stared at their retreating backs as his mouth dropped open. How could they think of conquering heaven right now? What about that mad goddess? Did she even exist? Or was she another of Garen's fancies? Natalie broke free from Garen and stalked over to where Uriah slumped to the ground and sat there, dazed. The wish stone still rested on his palm, but it lost its glow as he stared at it.
Well, it's been fun, but you have a mad goddess to deal with and I have an army to catch, so I'll see you around.
Garen clapped him on the back, then skipped after the army as he whistled a jaunty tune. It was probably the same march he hummed earlier.
What do you want to do now? Do we go after him or do we go after this rogue goddess? I don't think he ever said where she was.
Natalie studied him, but Archie Neal just stood there. What should he do now? He was an angel, so there was only one answer he could give without betraying all he was. Every fiber of his being cried out for one thing. Was he ready to go back there? He'd find out soon enough. I might have spent a really long time in hell convinced I fell from grace, but I didn't, and I can't let that army attack heaven. Archie Neal kicked the ground, sending a plume of dust into the air to mix with the dust the army already dislodged.
Good, because I didn't want to let Thaniel have all the fun repelling their attack, and I still haven't seen Garen commandeer an army. So far, he's just made a lot of claims about that, but he hasn't convinced anyone to follow him except us.
Natalie shook her head and offered Uriah a hand up. And we've already proved we're the biggest fools in hell. Archie Neal glanced skyward when no more light beams struck the ground. The giant gray ribbons of images faded as he stared at them. Did that mean they saved time or destroyed it?
Come on, he already got a head start, but who said he could keep it?
Natalie's pink glowing eyes brimmed with amusement above their veil as wings extruded from their shoulders through slits in the back of their gray robe. Very true. Are you coming with us? Archie Neal glanced at Uriah. The ex-god's dark eyes no longer swirled, nor were they filled with darkness. In fact, he looked rather ordinary now and not like a former pagan god.
I'm not much of a fighter, and I'm pretty spent, but I don't think hell's a great place to go right now given what just happened, so why not? Maybe you could set me down somewhere that I'll have a good view of things until I get my second wind.
Uriah straightened, so he stood tall instead of slouched from exhaustion.
Which one of you will fly me?
I'll take you. I could give you some of the power I siphoned from the adversary if that's okay with you.
Natalie extended a hand to the ex-god. Uriah clasped their forearm and shook it.
That sounds good to me, but I didn't get your name, and we should be properly introduced before you carry me. I'm Uriah, formerly a god of the underworld and a prisoner of the adversary. I'll go back and free the others when he cools off a bit.
I'm Natalie, and maybe I can help you with that. I've already helped one ex-god escape from a cell twice now. Perhaps I should expand my horizons and help other ex-gods do the same, but we can talk about that later. Let's go. I want to see if Garen actually fights this army off or if he fights to claim it.
Natalie pulled Uriah close and wrapped an arm around his waist before flapping their wings and lifting off. Archie Neal followed, but he he didn't offer to help because this battle might decide his future. As the wind ruffled his hair, all he could think about now was heaven. Trepidation squeezed his chest, but his mind filled with images of angels fighting against angels, and lavender blood splashed over the ruins of the war-torn city of purple crystal spires. Surely that was all gone now, since the war ended thousands of years ago. What was heaven like now? Would its guardians let him enter? Soon enough he would know, and may the Creator have mercy on anyone who got in his way, because he wouldn't. To be continued in Book 3 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy, Storm the Gates.
Note from the author Melinda Kucsera about Arginil. His revelation goes back to a conversation with my sister Carolyn from before she died. Carolyn had this theory that Lucifer wasn't really evil. She wondered what if he was framed. I don't remember all the particulars anymore since she died 10 years ago this February, but that was the heart of her theory, as I remember it. I just couldn't wrap my mind around that. Maybe it was my Catholic upbringing. What if another angel was framed or tricked into falling because the devil wanted them to do something? Now that was an idea I could explore. I wanted to explore that in a different book, but then I needed somewhere for Garen to steal the spell from. A summoning spell could go unnoticed in a library for centuries, so that was the logical place for him to steal it from. Then I needed someone to run the library, so Arginil volunteered. I didn't plan on doing his grand reveal in this book, but he kind of left me no choice when he switched sides in Gateway to Hell. He laid the groundwork for a dramatic revelation, and his conflicted nature made him the right candidate for this kind of backstory. So I let him have it. Now we'll see what an angel will do when he finds out he wasn't damned and didn't fall from grace, and what happens when his fellow angels find out.
You've been listening to Summon the Gods, Book 2 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy by Melinda Kucsera. Subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when the next part publishes. The Rogue Gods Trilogy is available as an ebook and paperback, and now a full cast audiobook. Click the link in the description to order your copy. If you love the Rogue Gods Trilogy, then you'll love Melinda's other epic fantasy adventure books too. They're just as full of magic and mayhem and characters who will do anything to achieve their goals. Check them out at the link in the description, and while you're there, sign up for her newsletter so her characters can talk directly to you. Thank you for listening.